Left off here in the ChatGPT window, you'll see that I'm using GPT-4 model to spit out a heap of code here. I'm pretty happy with this, and I'm now going to take this and pop this in my application. So I jumped into the components folder, created OpenAI component TSX, pasted the code in, and tried to give it a bit of a whirl. You'll notice here I've blanked out the API key because I have no intention of giving that to you. So we came across some issues, and if you have been paying attention closely to that code, you'll notice that this API URL is different. So if I jump back over here, you'll see the API was V1 engines DaVinci Codex completions. One of the downsides of the training data is it's not bang up to date, and so it was giving me an API URL that doesn't really exist anymore. There is a way to solve that. You can import the dependency into your project and then use the OpenAI module as such inside your app. That's definitely the way to go long term, and I'll cover that in another blog post separately. But this is just a raw direct against the API. So I went to the documentation and got the up-to-date URL. There's lots of mutations of this that you can work with, but this is the way I'm going here. You'll see that my const hard coded input here, what is the capital of France? That's come straight from there. And once I was able to save this and run the application, when I jumped over into my application, you can see that I'm getting a response error, and that's because that API key is not working. So what I'll do is I'll quickly just drag this off the screen, and I am going to pop my API key in there and rerun that. So if you give me 2 seconds, it's mostly because these API keys are quite heavily protected, and of course I don't want you spending all of my pennies. So now you can see my application has recompiled, and I'm now getting the response of Paris. So if I was to jump in and change that and put in, give me a list of article topics on the best ways to use generative AI, full stop, hit save, and we'll see what that does. There we go. You can now see that that is now spitting out basic text into my project. So I'm just going to quickly remove that API key again, and I'll just talk to you about a couple of other things I needed to do with the code. So when I come back in here, a couple of things I needed to do is I needed to add in this parameter to specify the model. I'm using GPT-3 here, DaVinci 003 model. I'm using input text as my prompt. I've got a token and temperature configuration here, which is just the defaults. We'll cover that later. And as you can see, that is simply exposing that component as OpenAPI component. When I go into my index TSX here, all I need to do is import the chat component. Ignore the red lines for now, it's because it's not compiling due to the API key. And then when I come down here, you can see that in between the 2 text area auto sizes, I've just spat out my component. So that's a really, really simple way of exposing the API to your application. In the next video, I'll talk to you a little bit about how we formatted this and got this onto the screen.